Now, an Australian capital has topped the list of the world's most livable cities. Go Australia, but there's no Harbour Bridge or Opera House in sight.
No, the number one place to live is south of the border in Melbourne. So what is it that makes Melbourne so livable?
And the people are friendly, good sport, good restaurants.
Lots of cafes and bars, good coffee.
I'll say it has probably really good clean air compared to the other cities that I've been here.
Sport and cafes, I think. A lot of choice, a lot of things to do, places to go.
Footy. Footy, of course. Footy. Weather. I love the weather.
We have the good environment and we have good transportation. Anything is good.
Melbourne, best city ever.
Far above everyone else. Particularly Sydney.
I lived in Camberwell for 10 years. I agree, it's such a classy city too. Demographer Bernard Salt joins us now from where else but Melbourne. He's moved there too. Now, we've heard why Melburnians love their city, Bernard, but this is the third time in a row it's topped the list of the world's most livable places put together by The Economist magazine in London.
Yes, in fact, this is a ranking that Melbourne loves to talk about. We're the most livable city in the world. And when you think about it, we have the infrastructure, we have the culture, good quality housing, sport, the environment. It all comes together in Melbourne. Mind you, several other Australian cities figured very well. It's just that Melbourne's just that little bit better than everywhere else in Australia.
Yeah, all right. Congratulations, Melbourne. Let's take a look at the world's top 10 now. After Melbourne, there's Vienna, Vancouver, Toronto and Calgary. Then Adelaide, followed by Sydney, Helsinki, Perth and Auckland. Australia features so much on this list. Why do you think that is, Bernard?
I think it's because of the security, stability, economic stability, political stability. We might complain about the cost of housing, but it's relatively affordable, and certainly in comparison to, say, a London or a Paris or a New York or a Tokyo, for example. It's a safe, secure environment. It's quite aspirational. You can live a good life in any of these capital cities in Australia.
Do you reckon Sydney and Perth were ranked lower than Melbourne and Adelaide because they are just so expensive to live in by comparison?
I've actually looked at the rankings, and Melbourne beat Sydney on the security issue. We have petty crime, whereas Sydney has a more serious crime level. I think cost of housing and infrastructure. Again, Melburnians complain about infrastructure, but it's better than the infrastructure you get in, say, a Perth. Or even in Sydney, for example.
Absolutely. Bernard, I think Brisbane's been robbed in all of this. Why didn't Brizzy make the cut?
Well, I think Brisbane might have made the say 10 to 20, but I think that environmental issues, so the floods and the cyclone issues of a few years ago, probably scored that city down.
Okay.
Bernard, I just find we don't appreciate where we live as much. So many people, we're so grumpy and doom and gloom, and figure polls like this come out and say, if we just smelt the roses, we should appreciate it more. Why don't we?
I think it's because we're an island continent. We've got no one to measure ourselves with. If we lived in Western Europe or in North America, we could compare ourselves with, say, the Belgians or the French or the Germans or the Mexicans or the Canadians. We've got no one to measure ourselves against, so we live in isolation and we compare ourselves with how things were in the past, back in the boom. As a consequence, we're a little bit grumpy. We don't take into consideration how we compare with every other city in Australia, in the world, in fact.
Well, Bernard, thank you for that. Good to see you.
My pleasure.
Always lovely to chat. I know.
And don't forget, we'll be in Brisbane tomorrow morning.
You may have missed out on the
Redcliffe.
top 10, Brizzy, but we're coming.
Yeah, well, they're still
That'll make
high. 100 out of 140 cities,
Oh, yeah.
Brisbane's between 10 and 20,
Yeah.
so it's still
Pretty
high.
good.